problem that I often get is that I've got some gas escaping, some CO2 bubbles escaping, and obviously we want to keep some of that in the beer. And there's all kinds of places where it can escape. If you've got some plans for me and how I can make sure that I actually keep hold of my CO2 in my tank.
Yeah, so when you look at the brew keg, there is a place that we intentionally let gas escape, and that is the VPRV valve. So step number one is we just ask customers to ensure that the VPRV valve, when you're pouring beer, is completely closed, because you're typically putting gas into the beer and you don't want that gas bottle to slowly empty through the VPRV, so it's closing it off. But even after that, sometimes we have customers who tell us that they're still detecting that their gas bottle's going down, but they're not pouring much beer. So then we go through a small diagnostic process.
You got some tips. I'm intrigued. You've got a balloon there. So
it's always good to start with a balloon. So basically what that allows us to do is put the balloon over the top of the VPRV, and you'll see there's a small ring over the top of it there that we can just put this over. And what we're doing is just then leaving that for an overnight, for a few hours, and we want to see if this is filling up with gas.
I've used some dry hopping sometimes, and I find that little pieces of hops get stuck within the VRP valve, and that's the reason why sometimes it might cause some leakage.
And that's a great point, because it's not necessarily that there's a failure in this piece. It can be that there is just a little bit of leftover hops or crud from the previous brew that just needs a thorough cleaning.
There's some other places where the gas can also escape. I know about this O-ring that's on the lid itself. It's sometimes there's a little bit of bubbling going on there.
Yep, so there's a couple of places. First of all, there is the silicone O-ring. We want to make sure that that is seated properly, and you can't visibly check that while your beer's there, but there is something you can do. The other thing too is that these posts need to be firmly screwed on, and they come firmly screwed on, but if for any reason that's changed, what we do is we just get a spray bottle. We fill it up with soapy water, because then you're seeing little fine bubbles, and just start spraying it around the top of the lid, around the top of each of these posts and around the top of the lid, and you're just looking to see if there's any sort of bubbles blowing through any leak.
I find that my posts for the connectors do come loose, and it's basically because you're working with hot and cold and hot and cold, and you've got some plastics, and then you've got the actual metal. So eventually, just with the contraction and expansion of the materials, it tends to come loose a little.
Yeah. And what you want to do with those, if there is any looseness in them, is you use a spanner to tighten them, but you don't wrench them on. You just tighten them to the point where you can feel firmness, and then you might go another 1/8 of a turn, just to give it that little bit of extra tightness.